We've been really excited to make this video, and mainly because we've now been full-time RV living for over 6 months, but ultimately we were excited to share how we've done it financially. And there are a few categories that we're going to go through, but I handle most of the finance in our family, which is why I'm going to walk you through it, and Christina is actually outside working out right now. First, let's get into the categories of breakdown of RV related costs, and then talk about what we're actually going to cover today. In the first category, this is going to be your rig related expenses. So this is if you have a motorhome, or if you have a travel trailer or a fifth wheel and a truck. Essentially, what is your living accommodation look like and cost? The second category is going to be lodging and travel related expenses. And these are going to be expenses that essentially are your camping fees, your propane, your fuel to drive from place to place, and so on. And then lastly is the personal consumption or variable expenses, really the things that are going to relate most closely to the lifestyle that you have and the way that you live. In this video, we're going to cover mainly the second category, which is your travel related and lodging expenses. And I'll hit on the rig expenses so you can see what we spent to do what we do. And then we'll just kind of glance over the personal consumption variable expenses, because those are truly going to differ from person to person, and it's not really a realistic look for your family. Before we dive into everything though, let's set a kind of a foundation or some ground rules, or more of maybe a system. And I just want to explain how we track everything and how we were able to even do this in the first place by creating a budget and then ultimately following the budget, and if we were off, adjusting future months so that we could adhere to the financial parameters that we set for ourselves going into full-time living. And this applies to you even if you don't full-time, even if you don't even RV at all. These are just basic budgeting principles that you need to have in life to make sure that you can hold yourself accountable to not overspending and making sure that you're saving for the future, whether that means retirement or a college fund for your children or whatever it might be. It's just really good practice. In our opinion, the starting point for all of this process begins with a budget. And personally, I've explored a ton of different options. I've run businesses in the past, I've sold businesses in the past, and I'm an accounting and finance person. So I understand what it takes to do this kind of stuff. And I struggled for a long time because there's a lot of different options out there for you personally to find a really great budgeting system that could hold you accountable and honestly be fairly easy to understand and set up in the first place, because some of these can get pretty complicated. And so after all that searching, we found YNAB, which is You Need a Budget, and it's awesome. It is a paid service. I don't really remember how much it is per year. I think it's like $90, or actually I know they have a interesting number. I think it's like 97. So you can pull in all of your banking feeds and everything, and it's all automated. It'll do things in the background. And then you can actually prioritize and input how much you want to assign to that, i.e. your budget, and then it will track your actual activity of what you're doing that given month. And so it does take a little bit of time to set up, and you can categorize it. We did it by credit card payments, debt payments, fixed expenses, living expenses, quality of life goals, and then just for fun. And we also have an investment property. Once you have a basic understanding of what your budget's gonna look like, then you can go and figure out what kind of setup you're gonna purchase in that first category, so your rig setup. And again, this is gonna vary extremely widely based on your personal preferences, based on travel taste, that sort of thing. For us, we were completely fine getting a used travel trailer, which was a 2017 Grand Design Reflection 315 RLTS, and a truck. And on the truck side, we definitely splurged because we knew we were gonna be driving in it quite a bit. And frankly, I've always had nicer vehicles from a trim level standpoint, so I never get the base model because I like things like vented seats and heated seats and adaptive cruise control, those sort of things. That's just my personal preference. So we ended up getting a 2019, it was used, a 2019 Ford F350 with the Platinum trim. So between the two of those, we spent about $25,000 on the travel trailer, which was used. There was no warranty or anything in that category, plus some sales tax because we paid cash for it. And then we purchased the truck for, I think it was about $67,000 roughly. And I had to fly up to Minnesota to go pick it up and bring it back. So there was definitely some additional cost to that. So when you add both those together, you're pretty close to $100,000 all in, just a little bit shy of that. But when you compare it to motorhomes, that honestly is a pretty decent price level for a Class A motorhome that's used and several years old, and you can go all the way up to something like a Newmar King Air that's just under $1 million to purchase brand new. So you can even go cheaper than we did too, and you can get an older truck with a lot higher miles, and with a diesel you're probably still in the $30,000 range. And then you could also go a lot cheaper on the travel trailer or fifth wheel and just get an older one if you want to renovate it or something in that category. So it really just depends. Again, that's why we're not going to really dive into that piece of it very deep. I just wanted to share, where we sit with what we purchased. And once you get an idea of this budget, then you can build out how much you can afford. So whether that's you're paying cash for your whole setup, or paying partly cash and partly financing, or financing everything and having some financing costs, then you can build that in and further see what you can afford to do and how much it's going to cost you over the course of a year. Once you get out on the road, which is a really exciting moment, you can start tracking what you're spending and you can map that back to your budget. So YNAB's really cool because you can plug all that in and you can see how you're doing, and it'll show you if you're over or under, and ultimately you can see real time how you're tracking to your budget. But one additional thing that I've done is I've actually created this custom spreadsheet in Google Sheets. And what I wanted to do was just at a quick glance, I'm more of a spreadsheet person. I wanted to just see, okay, how did we do that month? Not tracking to budget, but just actually spending money, and then just build a cool little map so we can see where that was so we can follow our route, which I'll get into the RV Trip Wizard, which is what we use to actually track the route, which is really cool. But I just wanted a quick view on seeing, where's the consolidation of expenses, where we're spending money, so that over time we might be able to see where the more expensive areas were to travel to. So you can see here we've broken it down into camping fees. If we stayed longer than a week, a lot of places have electric fee, fuel, which is diesel, internet expenses, laundry, propane. And then that kind of cascades down based on how we're going over time. And then ultimately, we decided to reroute our internet through our business. So we're not tracking that from a personal expense standpoint, and we've kind of bifurcated those. So again, you'll have to figure out how much your cell phone bill is going to be, how much your mobile internet will be, and adjust accordingly. Punching through this spreadsheet, I've built a bunch of tabs. So we started RVing in November of 2020. So that was the first tab that I created. And you can see this is just the detail of what that summary page has based on what we've spent, what the description was. And then all this actually feeds into that map as well, which will populate all these cool little dots to show you where you're spending money. And then I just built out the 2020 tabs as we were going. And then I built 2021 once we were back in January, so that I had everything listed here, which is why you can see into September, October, November, December, there's still nothing in here because we haven't booked any RV sites yet for those particular months. So what I really try and do is make sure that the campsite fees match to that particular month as much as possible. And that just helps me to understand when we spent the most money and where we were. And again, mapping back to the dots will kind of show us where we were located. So you can see over time, it's really fluctuated, and that just depends on where we're at and what the travel looks like. So if we look back in January, we were actually staying at a couple resorts that had just opened, and their fees were really, really low in Florida because they wanted to attract people there. So that really helped. And then you can see carrying over, some months were over 1,000. March was around 600. April, May, June was a pretty rare month because we stayed with a lot of family and friends. So that really helped. We did some driveway surfing and just were able to keep expenses low for those particular months. And then same thing for July. Now, August is going to be expensive. We're headed to Montana, and that's peak season. And we were a little behind the ball planning because we didn't really know when we would be there, number one. And number two, we wanted to build out the list of where we wanted to go and things we wanted to do and see. And that just took a little bit of time. So are paying a premium for that, which is okay, because for us, it's kind of a once in a lifetime thing because we haven't been out there yet, and we're really excited to see it. So that's definitely the most expensive month for camping. But at this point, we've booked all of August, so there's no additional fees that are going to be there. and we'll obviously incur fuel driving out there, but that won't populate until we actually spend the money, and we'll fill this in as we go along. So this, I would say, we really try and stay at nicer RV resort parks versus state parks, because for us, just with having Nash, gravel and dirt is not fun with a dog, and him tracking it in and having a dirty house all the time, it's just something we don't really prefer. So anytime we find a nice gravel level site that's part of a resort that has amenities like a gym, a nice laundry room, we're definitely going to take that, and we're more than willing to spend the money to do so. And that is, again, just our preference. But no matter what, you're still going to be spending money on nightly fees. So there's options out there like Boondockers Welcome and Harvest Host and Thousand Trails. And personally, we're not going to purchase any of those memberships because, number one, we don't want to be limited to where those locations are. We want to go wherever we want to go. We want to have that freedom and flexibility. And number two, we currently still don't have a generator or solar or any way to run the RV with all the stuff inside, like our computers and microwave, without being hooked up to shore power. And we're totally fine with that. We personally don't want to invest the $15,000 to $20,000 in solar to outfit this rig. And we also don't want to spend a bunch of money on a generator to just have in the truck and use it on occasion. It's just not worth it to us. So we choose to stay at the more expensive locations, and we're totally fine with that because we've got the budget to do so, because we prepared and saved and made sure that we could afford to live the way that we wanted to live. Two other things I want to show you is, the first, we build out a little calendar, and this helps us manage where we're staying and understanding the travel time that we're allocating, and then ultimately putting in the RV parks that we stay at, just so we have a very quick view. We also have a detailed view of this that we put more of the information around, what's the website, check-in times, confirmation numbers, that sort of thing. Between the combination of the detailed schedule and the calendar overview, we can look at any given time and see where we're going to be, when, and then where we're headed next. And it's just really helpful to remain super organized. And I'll show you the RV Trip Wizard, which also has all this information in a more detailed format that we can pull up on our phone and use GPS and that sort of thing. And then lastly, I just wanted to show you the other tab. And this is encouragement for anybody out there that's thinking about either getting an RV, doing the full-time thing, the part-time thing, doesn't matter from a time standpoint, but that's just looking at doing this. If you've watched our first video, we talked about how we sold most of our stuff. And this is the detail of what we sold. And this, I just wanted to show you the bottom number. This was what was pretty wild. We were selling literally everything. So desks, furniture, random utensils, kitchenware, like all kinds of stuff. And here's what's really cool. We sold $23,890.16 worth of stuff. Granted, $12,000 of that was a vehicle, and we only had one vehicle that we had to sell. So we ended up getting $12,000 cash for that. We didn't owe anything on it. So that brought our total to almost $24,000, which, if you remember, the cost of the RV was actually $24,500. I rounded up and said $25,000, but it was pretty close. So we traded those assets of things for this RV that would allow us to travel, and then we had to purchase the truck to be able to tow the trailer as well. So that was an additional cost. But this is just encouragement. You can go through your house, and it's kind of crazy because you don't realize how much value is actually sitting there and how much money you've actually spent over the course of time. And you can sell things like a Christmas tree skirt for $3. And bless Christina's heart, she tracked all this. And I'm glad she did, because we can look back and see exactly what we spent. We had gotten these masks from the airport when we flew, and she sold those for $5. It's things like that. Just get creative and find a way to fuel and fund your journey and what you want to do. It's not that difficult. Lastly, I wanted to show this RV Trip Wizard. And this software has been one of the best things that we purchased. I think we paid the annual fee to get this, but this is kind of wild. This is actually our route that we've done so far and are about to, which does include all the Montana stuff. And once we're done with that, we'll actually have driven 8,000 miles so far this year, which is pretty wild to look back on. And so what you can do here is you can actually track where you're going, and it will show you your routes ahead of time so that you can use this for GPS. But then also look backwards and see where you've been and what you've spent. You can load in all your campsite fees and it'll track all that. And I try and keep it in here just to be super detailed and accurate, but I have kind of laxed on that a little bit. But our main Google sheet contains all the costs, so I'm not really worried about that piece of it. But this is just really cool, and it'll give you those directions, and it'll show you how long of drive time you have based on your RV and what your travel speed is going to be. It's just really cool. So definitely something to look into. And so with the combination of YNAB, the custom spreadsheet that I built, and then RV Trip Wizard, that really helps us dial in all of our spending, where we're traveling, how we're staying organized about it, and just feeling really, really good and detailed as we have gone on this journey. And for the super detailed budget person, I also created this really custom spreadsheet, which is a very much more detailed version of just the whole budgeting process. And it actually will show very detailed views on what we're spending, how much, and what that relates back to how we budgeted. And it just shows more graphs based on visual. I'm a very visual person, so I want to see where most of our expenses are coming from. And it's a really cool way to stay super organized on what you're spending and ultimately adjust to what you want to be spending and make those micro tweaks so that you can be tracking either your savings goals, your spending goals, or whatever it might be. So in conclusion, I just want to encourage you. It's definitely intimidating when you start this process, but it's incredibly important. So work through the budgeting process, look through the things that you can sell around the house to contribute to the fund, whether it's your RV fund, your truck fund, your motorhome fund, whatever it is, because there's a lot of stuff out there that you can sell and you can turn it from one asset to another, and that's exactly what we did. If you have any questions, feel free to text us or email or leave a comment in YouTube, however you want to do that. Check the description because we have all that information there. I'm happy to share any of the spreadsheets free of charge that I use and just encourage you and help you in the process of getting out there and living the RV lifestyle and just having a ton of fun with it and enjoying experiences and people over the consumption of things.